We're glad to be joined by Steve Hellwagon. You can join him on Bucknuts and also 247 Sports talking Ohio State football with the Buckeyes lining up against USC. Losers of 7 straight in this series. Of course, most of us remember this as a huge Rose Bowl matchup a number of times.
I was a little guy the last time Ohio State won this game.
Yeah, I tell you.
But I'm pushing 50.
Of course, the last time out, Steve, was the Matt Barkley comeback, going about 90 yards against that Ohio State defense at the Shoe. And the year before was the first time we saw Terrell Pryor on the field in relief of Todd Beckman in a blowout at the Coliseum. What do you remember about those games?
Well, I've actually been around long enough to have attended the last 2 home and homes. I was a student at Ohio State in 1989. They went out to USC and they lost 42-3. Todd Marinovich was the quarterback then for USC, and then the following year, 90, USC came to Ohio State, and it was a tremendous thunderstorm hit the stadium, and they called the game off. It was a 9-point margin with 2.5 minutes to go. Ohio State failed to recover an onside kick, and John Cooper told Larry Smith and the officials at the time, hey, there's no point to play this last 2.5 minutes out because all USC was going to do was take a snap and I mean, they had a 2-score lead. So a lot of people have kind of held that against John Cooper that he gave up the game. If that game had been played today, Mark, they would have stopped it at the beginning of the 4th quarter because there was lightning everywhere. This is as recent as 1990. They played straight through a severe thunderstorm. And until, they had the brains or whatever to finally stop it. They ran into a buzzsaw in 2008 out at the Coliseum. USC was number 1 in the country. I believe Sanchez was the quarterback for his senior year. Ray Malaluga, Cushing. I mean, all those guys who've been playing in the NFL now for a few years were on that USC team. And I believe Pete Carroll was still the coach at that point. And they blistered Ohio State 35-3. They came back to Columbus next year with Barkley, as you mentioned, and it was something like an 18-15 game. Ohio State just couldn't get anything generated, and Barkley led USC down in the last drive of the game to win it. So, Ohio State really does owe USC. Those are the last 4, and then the 3 meetings prior to that would have all been Rose Bowls. I want to say, obviously 84 season, the 79 season, USC denied Ohio State the national championship with Earl Bruce and Arch Leister. Earl Bruce in his first year. And there's one more Rose Bowl since Ohio State won the one on January 1st of 74. So it is the Buckeyes has some payback in mind, I guess, and we'll see how that goes. Urban Meyer was on the staff in 84, I believe, for that Rose Bowl. I believe he may have been on the OSU staff at that point as a grad assistant.
Ohio State football fans, if you're not quite as old as Steve and I, you need to dig into your history a little bit because it's an illustrious series between Ohio State, USC, and as Steve outlines, most of those games in the Rose Bowl. Chris Carter was so fabulous in that 84 season, New Year's Day 85 game, that although the Buckeyes lost, I believe he was the MVP of that game. Keith Byers ripped off a big 50-yard run early in the game, but did little else in that one.
Yeah, no doubt. Chris Carter, I want to say, set some Rose Bowl records that day. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but somewhere around 8 or 10 catches and well over 100 yards and a touchdown. Mike Tomczak was the quarterback. Keith Byers was the running back. The defense, Eric Kumro would have been playing. And, of course, his nephews, Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa, have been stars for the Buckeyes now. Chris Spielman, Pepper Johnson, William White. I mean, so many guys who went on and played for years and years in the National Football League on both sides of the ball, and just kind of an exciting time it was for Ohio State fans to have won the Big Ten championship that season. They beat Michigan that year with Coach Earl Bruce and went on to the Rose Bowl. Unfortunately, weren't able to pull out the win, but certainly, I think about as a kid, as somebody growing up, it was always the Big Ten versus the Pac-10 on January 1st in the Rose Bowl until we got to 98 with the bowl championship series. And at that point, things started to take a turn. Some years the Rose Bowl would host the national championship and it would preempt that Big Ten Pac-12 or Pac-10 matchup, and we've only had it sporadically in recent years. There was a Penn State USC game last year, I believe. So, so we see it now and then, but now it's going to be at the Cotton Bowl instead of the Rose Bowl this time around.
Yeah, good stuff there. I could talk on and on, as I'm sure you could. Steve mentions 3 consecutive matchups in the 70s at the Rose Bowl. Each team blew out the other. There was a game also that USC won by 1 point and going for 2 on a late touchdown pass, 18-17.
Yep.
A lot of great players on the field on both sides.
Yeah,
that 1980 game, of course, Anthony Munoz and Paul McDonald and Charles White couldn't be stopped on that final drive as our
White 200 yards
sophomore led Ohio State in position to gain a #1 ranking in the 11-0 record, and that close to a national championship, 17-16. All right, Steve. Well, I'll bring it up to the here and now, and I won't drag any other folks out there back decades and decades.